Cosmic Displacement Princess Thalassa of the Luminar Federation pressed her palm against the transport pod's window, watching Montreal's skyline materialize through the morning fog. Earth seemed so small compared to the sprawling megacities of her homeworld Aurelium Prime. The buildings here didn't shimmer with photonic crystals or reach beyond the atmosphere. They were solid, grounded things of glass and stone, quaint in their way. "Your Radiance will be arriving at the diplomatic quarters shortly," said Sentinel Orion, his cybernetic eye scanning for threats even in this secure transport. "Ambassador, Solstice has arranged a formal reception with the Earth Coalition representatives tomorrow morning." Thalassa nodded absently, her 12 rings of nobility chiming softly with the movement, 6 on each wrist, each representing a star system under her family's protection. She'd spent 300 cycles preparing for succession to the Luminar throne, memorizing the complicated dance of interstellar politics, learning 17 languages, including 4 Earth dialects, and mastering the subtle psychic abilities that distinguished Luminar royalty. But she had never ordered her own meal or walked alone on a public street. "I wish to explore unaccompanied this afternoon," she announced suddenly. Sentinel Orion's expression remained neutral, though his cybernetic eye flashed red momentarily. "With respect, Your Radiance, that would violate security protocols established by the High Council." "I didn't request permission, Sentinel." Thalassa removed her ceremonial diadem, the neural links disengaging with a soft hiss. "I'll return before nightfall. You may inform Ambassador Solstice that I'm conducting independent research on Earth cultural practices." Before Orion could protest further, Thalassa slipped into the privacy chamber of the transport pod and exchanged her formal attire, a flowing garment of liquid crystal and bioluminescent silk, for the civilian Earth clothes she'd secretly acquired: simple trousers called jeans, a soft pullover garment, and sturdy shoes. She carefully concealed her wrist rings beneath long sleeves and tucked her naturally silver hair, a mark of Luminar nobility, under a knitted cap. 30 minutes later, she'd managed to exit the secure transport through an auxiliary hatch and was walking, unescorted for the first time in her life, through the streets of Montreal. The sensory information was overwhelming. Without her diadem's filters, she felt every emotion from passers-by, flickers of joy, stress, anticipation, worry, all humming against her consciousness like background radiation. Earth humans didn't know their emotions broadcast so clearly. They lacked the receptive abilities to sense each other's feelings as her people did. Snow began to fall, delicate crystalline structures so different from the mineral rains of Aurelium. Thalassa extended her hand, watching a snowflake melt against her warmer skin, feeling childlike wonder at the simple transformation. She followed the scent of something rich and unfamiliar to a small establishment with steamed windows and a sign reading Dashiell's Books and Brew. Inside, shelves of physical books, actual paper and binding, how charmingly obsolete, lined the walls, while small tables occupied the center space. A counter at the back featured mysterious equipment emitting aromatic steam. "First time seeing snow?" asked a voice, low and amused. Thalassa turned to find a human male watching her from behind the counter. He had dark hair tied back, interested eyes, and a curious half-smile. No neural augmentations, no status indicators, no ceremonial markings, yet something about his presence commanded attention. "Is it that obvious?" she replied, carefully modulating her accent to match the local dialect she'd studied. "You had that look, wonder mixed with confusion. Classic first snow face." He gestured toward the steaming equipment. "Coffee? It helps. With the cold." "Coffee?" Thalassa repeated. She'd studied Earth cuisine but never actually consumed any. "Yes, I would like to try coffee." "Any particular kind? We've got about 20 options." She faltered, unprepared for choices. On Aurelium, her meals were prepared according to precise nutritional and ceremonial requirements. "I'll take whatever you recommend," she said finally. "Brave," the man replied, his eyes crinkling. "I'm Dashiell, by the way. This is my place." "Thalia," she offered, using her prepared alias. "This is my first time in Montreal." "Well, Thalia," he said, beginning to operate the complex-looking equipment, Welcome to the best bookstore cafe in the city, possibly the universe, though I haven't checked the entire universe yet. Thalassa smiled at the irony. If only he knew she could tell him exactly which establishments in seven-star systems offered superior refreshments. But something about his unassuming confidence was refreshing after a lifetime surrounded by calculating courtiers. The universe is very large, she replied, but I suspect your assessment may be accurate. Dashiell laughed, and Thalassa felt something unexpected, a genuine emotional warmth radiating from him, uncomplicated by political ambition or social maneuvering. For the first time since landing on this strange planet, she felt her shoulders relax. Perhaps this unauthorized excursion would prove more enlightening than any official diplomatic function. Strange New Worlds, Thalassa cradled the ceramic mug between her palms, savoring the warmth as she observed Dashiell assist other customers. The cappuccino he'd prepared for her was a revelation, bitter yet sweet, with a textural complexity that reminded her of the ceremonial brews served during Luminar solstice celebrations, though considerably less psychoactive. She'd claimed a small table in the corner, surrounded by shelves containing what Dashiell had called science fiction classics. These paper books fascinated her. On Aurelium, all information was stored in crystalline matrices accessible via neural interface. These physical repositories seemed inefficient, yet somehow more intimate, bearing creases and marks from previous readers. Finding anything interesting? Dashiell appeared beside her table, gesturing toward the books she'd been examining. This author's conception of interstellar travel is creative, she replied, indicating a worn paperback. Dashiell smiled. Asimov had some wild ideas for the 1950s. What's your take on hyperspace jumps? Thalassa nearly answered with the actual quantum fold propulsion mechanics used by Luminar vessels before catching herself. I imagine it would require energy manipulation beyond our current understanding. Spoken like a physicist. Are you in academia? I'm in governance, she said carefully. Currently on a cultural exchange, hence the first-time snow experience. Where are you from originally? She'd prepared for this question. A small island nation in the South Pacific, very isolated, traditional culture. We don't get much snow. Dashiell nodded, though something in his expression suggested mild skepticism. Must be quite an adjustment. How long are you in Montreal? Approximately 14 Earth days. She caught herself. 2 weeks. A customer approached the counter, saving her from further scrutiny. Thalassa used the opportunity to browse the bookshelves, selecting a volume with an illustrated spacecraft on its cover that looked amusingly primitive compared to actual Luminar cruisers. When Dashiell returned, he carried a plate with something that emitted a buttery sweet aroma. Croissant, on the house. Cultural exchange, right? The casual generosity startled her. In Luminar society, every exchange was calculated, every gift carried obligation. That's very kind. What do I owe in return? Dashiell's eyebrows rose. Nothing. Just thought you might be hungry. I see, she said, though she didn't. She bit into the croissant and couldn't suppress a small sound of pleasure. The simple pastry somehow outshone the molecular gastronomy, creations prepared by the Royal Culinary Engineers. Good, right? Dashiell grinned. Francois across the street makes them fresh every morning. Real butter, none of that processed stuff. Thalassa nodded, feeling strangely overwhelmed by this uncomplicated pleasure. 26 years of diplomatic training hadn't prepared her for the directness of Earth interactions. So what brings a governance official to a little place like mine instead of some fancy diplomatic reception? Dashiell asked, leaning against a bookshelf. Thalassa chose her words carefully. Official functions rarely show the true nature of a place. I wanted to see how people actually live. And you picked a bookstore cafe with questionable plumbing and a cat that violates several health codes? As if summoned, an orange feline appeared from between two shelves, regarding Thalassa with suspicious yellow eyes. This is Nebula, Dashiell explained. Shop cat, unauthorized resident and destroyer of bestsellers she deems unworthy. Thalassa extended her hand cautiously. On Aurelium, Companion animals were genetically enhanced for intelligence and telepathic compatibility. This creature seemed refreshingly primitive. Nebula approached, sniffed Thalassa's fingers, then froze, fur rising along her spine. The cat hissed sharply, backing away with unblinking eyes fixed on Thalassa. That's weird. Dashiell frowned. She's usually friendly to a fault. Perhaps she detects something unfamiliar about me, Thalassa said, withdrawing her hand. She'd forgotten that Earth animals sometimes possessed heightened sensitivity to non-terrestrial biochemistry. International visitors don't usually freak her out, Dashiell observed, though we don't get many South Pacific diplomats. Before Thalassa could respond, the bookstore door opened with a blast of cold air. 3 men in nondescript dark clothing entered, their movements too coordinated to be casual customers. Though they wore no visible insignia, Thalassa immediately recognized the methodical scan of the room as standard Luminar security protocol. Her excursion had been discovered sooner than anticipated. I should go, she said abruptly, rising from her chair. What do I owe you for the coffee? Dashiell looked confused by her sudden shift. $4.50, but there's no rush. Thalassa fumbled with the unfamiliar Earth currency she'd acquired, placing several bills on the table. This was educational, thank you. She moved toward the rear of the shop, hoping to find an alternative exit. The security detail hadn't spotted her yet, but they would soon verify the identities of everyone present. Hey, wait, Dashiell called after her, but she was already slipping through a door marked Staff Only, finding herself in a narrow hallway leading to a back alley. The cold air hit her face as she emerged behind the building, snow now falling more heavily. She'd have to return to the diplomatic quarters and face the consequences of her unauthorized exploration. But the brief taste of freedom, of simple, unmediated interaction, had been worth whatever reprimand awaited. Something made her pause and look back at the weathered brick building. Through a foggy window, she could see Dashiell speaking with the security team, gesturing toward the front door, as if directing them elsewhere. He was covering for her escape, though he couldn't possibly understand why. Thalassa felt a strange tightness in her chest. In a life governed by protocol and duty, this small, inexplicable kindness from a stranger seemed more significant than all the elaborate courtesies of interstellar diplomacy. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt a disconcerting thought form. What if the simple connections formed in places like this held more value than the grand alliances she'd been sent to forge? With one last glance at the bookstore, Princess Thalassa of the Luminar Federation disappeared into the snowy streets of Montreal, her mind filled with thoughts of coffee, croissants, and a bookseller who'd shown her more of Earth in an hour than any official guide could have in days. Secrets among stars. The diplomatic quarters hummed with tension. Thalassa stood before the holographic projection of Ambassador Solstice, whose translucent form shimmered with barely contained frustration. Your radiance, while I understand your curiosity about Earth culture, your unscheduled excursion created significant security concerns, the ambassador said. Her voice modulated to perfect diplomatic neutrality despite her evident displeasure. I apologize for the disruption, Ambassador, Thalassa replied, maintaining the serene expression expected of Luminar royalty. However, I found the experience invaluable. The official reports on Earth social dynamics lack nuance. Nuance is a luxury we cannot afford at present, Solstice countered. Her holographic form flickered momentarily as she accessed data from Aurelium Prime. The High Council has sent troubling news. House Meridian is mobilizing. Thalassa's composure faltered. House Meridian, the second most powerful dynasty in the Luminar Federation, traditional rivals to her own House Celestis, had been suspiciously quiet during preparations for this diplomatic mission. Prince Tarek has departed Aurelium on an unregistered vessel, Solstice continued. Intelligence suggests he may be bound for Earth. Tarek is here? Thalassa's rings chimed softly as her hands tensed. What could he possibly want on Earth? The same thing we seek? Alliance. But while we pursue peaceful partnership, House Meridian likely aims to exploit Earth's resources and strategic position. Solstice's holographic eyes narrowed. Your Radiance, this mission has become even more critical. The treaty signing must proceed without complication. After the briefing concluded, Thalassa dismissed her attendants and stood alone by the window, watching snowflakes dance in the Montreal twilight. The agreement she was here to secure wasn't merely a diplomatic formality, it was protection for Earth. Without Luminar recognition, this promising but vulnerable planet would be open to exploitation by houses like Meridian, who viewed developing worlds as resources rather than partners. Her thoughts drifted to the bookstore and its keeper. Dashiell had shown her a glimpse of what made this world worth protecting. Its unpretentious authenticity, its simple pleasures unenhanced by technology. 3 days later, against all better judgment and with considerably more stealth, Thalassa again slipped away from her security detail. This time she wore a different Earth outfit and had applied a temporary pigment to her silver hair, giving it a warm brown tone. When she entered Dashiell's Books and Brew, the familiar scent of coffee and paper welcomed her. The shop was busier than before, with several tables occupied by customers reading or working on portable computers. Dashiell looked up from the counter, recognition dawning slowly. "The diplomatic croissant enthusiast returns," he said when she approached, keeping his voice low. "I was beginning to think you'd been extracted by your government." Thalassa blinked in surprise. "What makes you suggest that?" "Those men who came in after you? Not exactly subtle." He leaned closer over the counter. "Military or intelligence, right? Your small island nation must be more significant than you let on." "It's complicated," she admitted. "It usually is." He started preparing a drink without asking what she wanted. "Those guys came back the next day, showed me a photo, asked if I'd seen you. I told them my memory for faces is terrible." Thalassa studied him, puzzled by this deception on her behalf. "Why would you do that?" Dashiell shrugged. "Anyone being chased by men in tactical gear disguised as casual wear probably has a good reason for avoiding them. Plus you tipped like 40%. Is that excessive?" she asked, genuinely uncertain about Earth commerce customs. "Only if you're trying to blend in," he replied with a hint of amusement, sliding a cappuccino toward her. "So, does the mysterious Thalia have a last name?" She caught herself. Sullivan. Thalia Sullivan. "Well, Thalia Sullivan, who's definitely not hiding anything interesting, your usual table is free." He nodded toward the corner spot she'd occupied during her previous visit. As she settled at the table, Nebula, the cat, emerged from between the bookshelves, regarding her warily before approaching with cautious steps. This time the feline merely sniffed her hand suspiciously before curling up on an adjacent chair, maintaining vigilant observation. "Progress," Dashiell noted, appearing beside her table with another croissant. "She's decided you're suspicious but tolerable." "A fair assessment," Thalassa acknowledged. Dashiell studied her for a moment. "You know, I've been thinking about you. Not many cultural exchange visitors get followed by security teams, or speak English with that particular accent, which, by the way, isn't from any South Pacific island I've ever heard of. You seem well-traveled," she deflected, "enough to recognize when someone's out of their element." He sat down across from her. "Look, I'm not asking for state secrets, but if you're in some kind of trouble." The door chimed, and Thalassa's attention snapped toward the entrance. A tall figure entered, brushing snow from expensive Earth clothing that nonetheless couldn't disguise a distinctly non-terrestrial bearing. Though his silver hair was concealed and his wrists bare of rings, she immediately recognized the sharp features and calculating eyes of Prince Tarek Meridian. Her heart hammered. If Tarek discovered her here unprotected by her security detail, diplomatic protocols would offer little defense. "I need to leave," she whispered urgently. "Now." Dashiell, sensing her distress, glanced toward the newcomer. "Friend of yours?" "The opposite." "Please, is there another way out?" Without questioning further, Dashiell nodded toward a narrow staircase. "Upstairs. Through my apartment, fire escape to the alley. Keys under the flower pot by the door." "Thank you," she said, rising carefully to keep her back to Tarek. "I can't explain now, but that man is dangerous. Don't tell him you've seen me. I'm getting pretty good at forgetting faces." Dashiell assured her. Go, I'll run interference. As Thalassa slipped toward the stairs, she heard Dashiell greet the newcomer with deliberate enthusiasm, launching into a detailed explanation of the shop's rare book collection. The last thing she saw before ascending was Tarek's impatient expression as Dashiell positioned himself squarely between the prince and her escape route. Whatever game Tarek was playing by coming to Earth, he had just made it personal. And now, she'd inadvertently involved Dashiell, an innocent Earth human caught between interstellar rivals. Thalassa reached the upstairs apartment, finding it as charmingly haphazard as the shop below. Books were stacked on every surface, star charts and astronomical posters covered the walls, and a telescope pointed out a small window toward the night sky. The irony wasn't lost on her. This human gazed up at stars that her people had traveled between for centuries, and now those distant conflicts threatened to engulf his simple, beautiful world. Whatever happened next, she couldn't allow Earth to become collateral damage in Luminar politics, and somehow protecting Dashiell had become equally important. The journey home 3 weeks in jump space had changed things between them. The cramped confines of Kavex's vessel, which Olivia had learned was called the Veshtaral or Windseeker, had forced proximity that gradually transformed from wary coexistence to something approaching trust. We'll reach the trading outpost at Kalari Station tomorrow, Kavex announced, studying navigation charts at the ship's central console. His posture had relaxed over their time together, the rigid military bearing giving way to something more natural. Olivia looked up from the Vexaran historical texts she'd been studying on a data tablet. Will it be safe? Your face must be well known throughout the galaxy. Vexarans all look alike to most species, he replied with that eye-flicker smile. And Kalari caters to those avoiding attention. We'll blend in. She doubted that. Even among aliens, a 7-foot telepathic reptilian would stand out. But she kept that thought carefully shielded behind her mental barriers, a courtesy they'd established early in their journey. What's our plan once we're there? She asked. Kavex's scaled hands paused over the console. I need to contact certain allies. There are factions within the Empire who have questioned our expansion policies for decades. Tezra's coup may have forced their hand. A Vexaran civil war? The prospect was both hopeful and terrifying. Perhaps. But first we need information. He turned to face her. The Lazarus shield protecting Earth. How long will it last? It was a question he'd asked several times, and she'd always deflected. This time, she decided to answer truthfully. The shield was designed to last approximately 6 months at full strength. After that, power reserves will begin to fail. 6 months, he repeated. Not enough time for your people to evacuate or rebuild defenses. No. Olivia set the tablet aside. Just enough time to hope for a miracle. Their eyes met across the cabin. Over weeks of conversation, mental exchanges, and shared survival, she'd learned to read his alien expressions, the subtle shifts of scale color, the positioning of his sensory ridges. You want to go back, he said. It wasn't a question. Earth is my home, she replied simply. Whatever happens to it, I should be there. Kavex moved to the viewport, watching the distorted reality of jump space. If I return, I face execution as a traitor. If you return, you face likely death when the shield fails. Yet here we are discussing it as a possibility. Olivia joined him at the viewport. 3 weeks ago, you would have dismissed the notion immediately. 3 weeks ago, I knew who I was. His voice held an unfamiliar note, uncertainty. 3 centuries of conquest following orders, believing in the necessity of our expansion. Your mind has complicated things. The mental exchanges they'd shared had been transformative for both of them. Through their connected consciousness, she had experienced the immense weight of his centuries, the sterile loneliness of command, the growing doubts he'd suppressed beneath duty and routine. In turn, he had witnessed her memories of Earth. Not just its strategic value or military capacity, but its beauty, diversity, the complex tapestry of human relationships that defined her species. I've been thinking, she said carefully. About what you told me regarding the 3 species who betrayed Vexaran trust. What if the problem wasn't coexistence itself, but the approach? Forced integration under conquest creates resistance. Voluntary alliance builds strength. Theory versus survival, he countered, but without conviction. The Vexaran Empire has enough resources to sustain itself for millennia, Olivia pressed. What if expansion stopped? What if, instead of the next conquest, your people focused on stability? On creating something lasting rather than consuming what others have built? Kavex's scales shifted to deeper blues, a sign of deep thought she'd come to recognize. You suggest I join these dissident factions? Become a revolutionary against my own empire? I suggest you become what you were meant to be. Olivia took a risk and placed her hand on his scaled arm. Not Kavex the Conqueror, but Kavex the Transformer, the one who changed the course of an empire. A proximity alarm shattered the moment. Kavex moved swiftly to the console. We're being pursued, he said, voice tense. Vexaran hunter ships. They must have tracked our jump signature. How is that possible? Tezra. His voice hardened. She always was brilliant with tracking technology. He began activating defensive systems. We won't reach Kalari in time. Olivia joined him at the controls. Options? Few. His hands moved rapidly across the navigation system. There's an uncharted debris field nearby, remnants of an ancient battle. We might lose them there. The ship shuddered as they changed course, dropping out of jump space into normal reality. Through the viewport, Olivia saw the glittering field of destruction, twisted metal and shattered hulls spanning thousands of kilometers. Whose battlefield is this, she asked as they dove into the maze of wreckage. Unknown. These ships match no known configuration in Vexaran records. Kavex guided them deeper into the debris. The battle appears to have occurred at least a millennium ago. Behind them, 3 Vexaran hunter ships emerged from jump space, weapons charging. They're hailing us, Olivia reported from the communications console. Kavex nodded grimly. Put it through. Commander Tezra's face appeared on the screen, her scales glowing with the vibrant reds of victory. General Kavex, the High Command sends their regards and orders for your immediate termination. Surrender the human researcher, and we may consider leniency. You've overreached, Tezra, Kavex replied calmly. The High Command would never authorize my execution without trial. Times change, General. The Empire requires new leadership for new challenges. Her eyes shifted to Olivia. Dr. Reed, a fascinating specimen. Our scientists are eager to examine how you've corrupted a Vexaran mind. Olivia didn't respond, instead studying the ancient wreckage around them. Something about the design of these ships seemed strangely familiar. An idea formed, desperate, possibly suicidal, but their only chance. Kavex, she whispered. Take us deeper into the field, to the largest wreck. The grand reception hall of Montreal's Interstellar Diplomatic Center gleamed with crystalline decorations designed to mimic Luminar architecture. Earth officials in formal attire mingled with Thalassa's delegation, their nervous excitement palpable. After centuries of speculating about extraterrestrial life, humanity was about to enter the interstellar community officially. Thalassa stood at the center of it all, resplendent in traditional regalia, flowing garments of bioluminescent fabric that shifted colors with her movements, her silver hair adorned with the neural diadem that marked her status. She was every inch the Luminar princess, yet her thoughts kept drifting to a cluttered bookstore and its keeper. Your Radiance, Ambassador, Solstice murmured, approaching with measured steps. Prince Tarek has arrived with his delegation. He's requesting a private audience before the treaty signing. In the observation chamber, Thalassa decided. And Solstice, have the security protocols been updated as I instructed? Yes, Your Radiance. The treaty now includes the protective clauses you specified. Earth will be shielded from unauthorized resource extraction and cultural interference. The observation chamber featured a glass dome revealing the night sky, a symbolic gesture connecting Earth to the stars. Prince Tarek waited inside, his aristocratic features arranged in a diplomatic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Princess Thalassa," he greeted her with a formal bow. "How fortunate that our paths cross on this primitive but charming world." "Spare me the pleasantries, Tarek," she replied coolly. "I know House Meridian didn't send you here for cultural exchange." Tarek's smile thinned. Direct as always. "Very well. My house believes Earth would benefit from more active development than your conservative approach allows. Their resources, their strategic position, their sovereignty," she interrupted, "which the treaty I'm signing tonight will protect. A treaty that requires Senate ratification," he reminded her. "The Senate where my house holds significant influence. Influence that could be redirected if certain compromises were reached." "What compromises?" "Marriage alliance." Tarek's expression was calculating. "House Celestis and House Meridian, united at last. Together we could shape Earth's development without interference." Thalassa had anticipated this proposal. Political marriages were common among Luminar nobility. What she hadn't anticipated was her own visceral rejection of the idea, stronger than any diplomatic calculation. "Earth deserves the chance to develop, without becoming a pawn in Luminar politics," she stated firmly. "My answer is no." "Consider carefully, Princess." Tarek's voice hardened. "Without my support, the treaty may fail. Earth would remain unprotected, open to whoever arrives first with the technology to exploit its potential. Or perhaps Earth will surprise you," came a voice from the chamber entrance. Thalassa turned to find Dashel standing in the doorway, looking remarkably composed despite the formal setting. He wore what appeared to be his best Earth attire, not quite diplomatic standard, but dignified in its simplicity. "This is a private diplomatic discussion," Tarek said dismissively. "Security." "Actually," Dashel replied, "I'm here by invitation." He produced an official credential. "Earth Coalition observer to the treaty proceedings. Apparently someone put my name forward as a cultural consultant." Thalassa maintained her royal composure, but inwardly smiled at Ambassador Solstice's resourcefulness in arranging this. "Mr. Dashel Wright," she acknowledged formally. "Your insights on Earth culture have been invaluable to our delegation." Tarek's eyes narrowed as he assessed the human. "This bookseller is your cultural advisor?" "Among other things," Dashel replied before Thalassa could speak. "And as an advisor, I should mention that Earth has a long history of resisting outside control. We're kind of stubborn that way." "How quaint," Tarek sneered. "Your world has barely achieved rudimentary space travel." "True," Dashel conceded. "But we've created art that moves people to tears, music that survives centuries, and coffee that apparently impresses even interstellar royalty. Technology isn't the only measure of advancement." Thalassa stepped forward. "Prince Tarek, I believe. We've concluded our discussion. The treaty signing will proceed as scheduled." After Tarek departed with barely disguised contempt, Thalassa turned to Dashel, dropping the formal mask she'd worn throughout the exchange. "Cultural consultant?" she asked, unable to suppress a smile. "Ambassador Solstice contacted me yesterday. Said someone with authentic Earth perspective was needed." He glanced around the ornate chamber. "This is not what I expected when I opened a bookstore. Are you disappointed? Terrified? Overwhelmed? Amazed?" His eyes met hers, but not disappointed. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then reality reasserted itself as an aide approached to announce the ceremony was ready to begin. "I return to Aurelium tomorrow," Thalassa said quietly. "My duties there can't be postponed indefinitely." "I figured." Dashel hesitated. "What happens after the treaty? To Earth, I mean." "Cultural exchange programs, limited technology sharing, protective monitoring." She touched one of her nobility rings. "And a permanent Luminar diplomatic presence. Headed by Ambassador Solstice initially." Thalassa took a breath, but royal visits would be scheduled periodically, for oversight. Understanding dawned in Dashel's eyes. "How periodically?" "Quarterly, perhaps. with extended stays for cultural immersion. For the first time since she'd met him, Dashiell seemed at a loss for words. Finally, he asked, would visiting royalty require formal accommodations, or could they possibly stay somewhere more authentic, to better understand Earth culture? Thalassa felt a warmth that had nothing to do with her bioluminescent attire. I believe certain protocols could be adjusted, for diplomatic purposes, of course. Of course, he agreed, a smile spreading across his face. Cultural authenticity is crucial for interstellar relations. As they walked together toward the ceremony that would connect their worlds officially, Thalassa realized she'd discovered something her advanced civilization had nearly forgotten: that across all the vast distances of space, the most powerful force might still be the gravitational pull between two hearts finding their unexpected orbit. In the Great Hall, beneath Earth's stars and before representatives of two worlds, Princess Thalassa of the Luminar Federation signed the treaty not merely as a diplomatic formality, but as a promise to protect the beautiful complexity she'd found in a snowy city, a book-lined shop, and the human who'd shown her that some connections transcend even the space between stars.